It started, as these things often do, with hunger. She didn't remember how she got here, only that she was hungry, cold, and alone. The chains around her wrists were too big, too heavy, but they didn't care. To the slavers, she was just another piece of cargo, another insignificant life among the thousands trapped in the dark, rusted belly of the ship. The girl, Mira, though no one had spoken her name in weeks, huddled against the metal wall, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to hold onto the warmth of her own breath. The ship hummed, a deep, guttural sound that never stopped, vibrating through the bones of its prisoners. They had taken her from Earth. She remembered the sky breaking open, the screech of burning metal as ships descended. The city had been reduced to flickering fire and smoke within hours. She had hidden under a collapsed supermarket sign, the bright red letters half melted from the heat. But the Zyrax were relentless. Mira had heard of them before. Everyone on Earth had. They were the nameless horror in every whispered story about missing freighters, the nightmare that made deep space colonists pray to gods they no longer believed in. The Zyrax didn't just conquer, they consumed. Planets, people, cultures, reduced to nothing but resources. And Mira, like so many others, had become one of those resources. Her stomach twisted again, a hollow, aching thing. The slavers didn't feed the children much. They were meant to be sold as servants, not laborers, and a half-starved servant was easier to control. The door to the cargo hold hissed open. The harsh light made her squint, and the stink of sweat, fear, and old metal grew sharper. One of the guards, a hulking reptilian with dull, segmented armor fused into its scales, stomped in, dragging a heavy chain behind it. New orders, it grunted in garbled galactic standard. You, come. Mira didn't move at first. The last time someone had been called away, they hadn't come back. But the guard took 2 steps forward and backhanded the nearest prisoner, a boy who had barely turned 10, sending him sprawling into the filth. Mira swallowed hard and stood. The chain was snapped around her wrist, and she was hauled out of the cargo bay, down a winding corridor filled with more guards. The Zyrax weren't the only ones working the ship. There were mercenaries too, species Mira didn't recognize, their expressions blank with the quiet indifference of those who had seen suffering too many times to care. She was shoved through another doorway. The smell hit her first, rich, tangy, filled with spices she didn't recognize. A kitchen. Pots bubbled, steam hissed, and alien creatures bustled around, chopping, stirring, grinding. The air was thick with heat and the scent of sizzling meat. Myra's stomach growled so loudly that one of the cooks, a squat, 4-armed alien with oily skin, snorted in amusement. The Zyrax guard unshackled her. Teach her something. It barked at a taller figure near the back. Or kill her. Doesn't matter. The figure turned. A Dracian. Tall, wiry, with a face like carved stone and yellowed tusks curving from his lower jaw. His black eyes flicked over Mira once before he scoffed. A human? Useless. The guard shrugged and left. Mira felt the weight of the Drexian's gaze, but she didn't flinch. She was used to being looked at like that, like something broken, like something weak. The Dracian sighed and turned back to his station. If you're not dead in a week, maybe I'll bother learning your name, he muttered. Mira took a step forward, and her eyes landed on a bowl of chopped vegetables beside him. Her mother used to cook. Back when things were normal, before Earth burned, before the sky shattered. Mira grabbed a knife. The Dracian moved so fast she barely saw it. One of his clawed hands slammed on her wrist, stopping the blade just as it hovered over a piece of alien root. For a moment, they stared at each other. Myra's hand didn't tremble. The Dracian released her and grunted. Fine, he said. Try not to cut off your fingers, human. She exhaled and got to work. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, the decision to pick up a knife, to act, to move forward instead of waiting to die, was the first step toward changing the fate of the galaxy itself. The first week nearly killed her. The kitchen was a battlefield of noise and heat. Pots clanged, flames roared, and the air was thick with steam and the sharp scent of alien spices. The Dracian cook, who, after 5 days of silence, finally revealed his name was Cordith, had little patience for weakness. If you fall behind, you don't eat, he growled. Mira had fallen behind. Many times. She had burned herself on boiling oil, sliced her fingers on unfamiliar, fibrous vegetables, and once nearly collapsed from exhaustion. But she hadn't stopped. She learned by watching, mimicking Cortitha's fluid, effortless movements. He had 4 arms, which made him faster, but Mira made up for it by thinking ahead, anticipating what needed to be done before he could snap at her for being too slow. By the 10th day, she was no longer just surviving. She was cooking. She learned how to work the massive stone-heated woks, how to grind the fragrant purple roots into a paste that turned broth silky. She learned which spices were sweet, which were fire-hot, which ones turned bitter if cooked too long. Cortith never praised her, but he stopped shoving her aside to redo her work. That was praise enough. The other kitchen staff came to tolerate her presence. Jill, a feline-like alien with sleek black fur, would flick her tail at Myra's shoulder in greeting. Gar, a lumbering, six-eyed brute, let her borrow his favorite cutting knife, something he never did for anyone else. Still, it wasn't enough. The slavers didn't care how well she cooked. She was still a prisoner, and that meant, at any moment, she could be taken, sold, killed. So she listened. The kitchen was the heart of the ship, and every officer, every guard, every important figure passed through it eventually. Conversations drifted between the clang of pans and bubbling stews. She learned that the ship was en route to the core worlds, where the captives would be auctioned off. She learned that the Zyrax warlord who commanded the vessel, Overlord Vorkith, had a particular fondness for rich, spiced meats and hated anything bitter. And she learned something else, something far more dangerous. Vorkith's personal chef had been executed 3 days ago. The warlord had a reputation for killing cooks who displeased him. Food was not just sustenance to the Zyrax, it was power. Their ruling class believed that only the strong should consume the finest meals, and if a dish was anything less than perfection, it was seen as an insult to their superiority. That was why Cortith was worried. Overlord Vorkith is coming down for his first meal tomorrow, Cortith muttered that night, as Mira helped him clean the kitchen. I have to prepare the warlord's dish myself. And if he doesn't like it, he trailed off, but he didn't need to finish. If Vorkith wasn't pleased, Cortith would die. And Mira? She doubted she'd be far behind. The next day, the kitchen was in chaos. The tension in the air was suffocating. Cortith barked orders, his movements sharp with barely concealed nerves. Mira kept her head down and focused. She knew what needed to be done. Vorkith's preferred meal was grilled durvac meat, marinated in the deep crimson sauce made from Syraxian fire fruits. It had to be cooked over open flame, seared perfectly. Any less, and it was too raw. Any more, and it was considered an insult. Cortith was good, but today he was distracted, and in his distraction, he made a mistake. Mira saw it before anyone else. The fire fruit sauce had been overheated, the sugars inside caramelizing too fast. It would be too bitter. If Cortith served it as it was, Vorkith would kill him. Her heart pounded. She could stay quiet. Let Cortith make the mistake. Save herself. But she didn't. Before she could second-guess herself, she moved. She grabbed a fresh fire fruit, crushed the pulp between her fingers, and mixed it into the sauce at the last moment, balancing the flavors just as Cortith was plating the dish. He froze, watching her. She didn't back down. It was too bitter, she said, voice steady. A slow realization dawned in Cortith's dark eyes. He glanced at the sauce, tasted a drop, then let out a long breath. You have a death wish, human, he muttered. The meal was sent up to the warlord's chambers. The kitchen was silent, waiting. Minutes dragged into eternity. Then, a voice crackled over the intercom. The warlord demands to know who altered his dish. Cortith turned to Mira. You did this, he said. Her stomach dropped. Before she could speak, guards stormed into the kitchen, grabbing both her and Cortith. They were dragged through the ship's winding halls, past other prisoners who shrank away, past crew members who didn't even look up. The doors to Vorkith's private dining hall opened, and they were thrown inside. At the head of the table sat Overlord Vorkith. He was massive, taller than any human, with jagged black scales and burning orange eyes set deep beneath a heavy brow. His claws tapped the metal table in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The plate before him was empty. Mira forced herself to meet his gaze. Vorkith tilted his head. You. It wasn't a question. Myra's mouth was dry. Yes. A long silence stretched between them. Then, Vorkith grinned, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Interesting. Mira braced herself for death. Vorkith's grin was a predator's amusement, the kind that came right before a kill. The warlord leaned forward, resting his massive arms on the table. You altered my meal. It wasn't a question. Mira swallowed, forcing herself to stand tall, even as her legs trembled. The sauce was bitter, she said. It would have ruined the balance of the dish. The room was silent. Then Vorkith laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that sent chills through her bones. The guards around them shifted uneasily, as if laughter from their warlord was more terrifying than his rage. Cordith stood rigid beside her, his forearms clenched into fists. He had accepted his fate the moment they were dragged here. Mira, however, wasn't ready to die. You have guts, human, Vorkith said. His burning orange eyes narrowed. Most creatures in this galaxy cower before me. You do not. Myra's heart pounded. She had no idea if this was good or bad. Vorkith turned his gaze to Cordith. And you allowed a mere child to fix your mistake. Cordith stiffened but didn't speak. Vorkith's grin vanished. Kill him. The words sent ice through Myra's veins. Before she could process them, the guards moved. Cordith barely had time to react before one of them seized him by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Myra's body moved before her mind could stop it. Wait, she shouted. The room went deathly still. Vorkith's gaze snapped to her, his expression unreadable. You dare interrupt me? Mira knew she had just made a mistake. A fatal one, but she didn't care. She turned to the warlord, hands clenched into fists. He didn't fail. I only fixed the sauce because I learned from him. If you kill him, you lose a great chef. Vorkith regarded her with unsettling stillness. You believe he is still of use to me? Mira forced herself to nod. Yes. The warlord leaned back in his chair, considering. Then, after a long pause, very well. Mira exhaled shakily. Vorkith's grin returned, sharp as a blade. Then you will take his place. She froze. What? You save his life, Vorkith said. Now you will serve as my personal chef. His gaze flicked to Cordith. And he will answer for your failures. Myra's stomach twisted. Cordith's life was now in her hands. She had won, but at what cost? The guards released Cordith, and Mira was led away. Her new prison was a gilded one. Unlike the sweltering kitchen below decks, Vorkith's private culinary chamber was pristine. Black marble counters, gleaming steel equipment, exotic ingredients stored in crystal containers. It was a chef's paradise. And a cage. She wasn't allowed to leave. 2 guards stood at the door at all times, watching her with unblinking reptilian eyes. The only time she saw anyone else was when a servant arrived to deliver requests from the warlord. The first dish she had to make for him was simple: seared Syraxian bloodfish, seasoned with ground shadow pepper and served with a side of fermented fungus paste. But simple didn't mean easy. The fish had to be cut perfectly, each slice uniform. The fungus paste had to ferment for exactly the right amount of time. Too little, and it was bland. Too much, and it became toxic. She worked in silence, the weight of Cordith's life pressing on her shoulders. When the dish was ready, it was sent to Vorkith's chambers. She waited. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, a voice crackled over the intercom. Acceptable. Mira released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had passed for now. Days turned to weeks. Mira cooked for Vorkith every day. The warlord was unpredictable. Some days he demanded fiery dishes that set the tongue ablaze. Other times he wanted delicate, subtle flavors that lingered like whispers. She learned quickly. She experimented. She pushed the boundaries of what she knew. And, little by little, she realized something. Vorkith didn't just eat for pleasure. He ate for power. Food was sacred to the Zyrax. It wasn't just sustenance. It was a symbol of strength. The higher one's status, the greater the meals they consumed. A leader like Vorkith wasn't just expected to eat well. He was expected to eat like a god. And Mira? She was the one shaping his power. She tested limits. She introduced new flavors, new techniques. She combined Syraxian ingredients in ways no one had before. And Vorkith noticed. "You surprise me, human," he said one night, after devouring a dish she had spent 3 days perfecting. "You do not cook like a slave. You cook like a conqueror." Mira didn't know how to respond. Then Vorkith leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Tell me, little chef, what do you desire?" The question sent a jolt through her. Desire? She had spent so long just trying to survive, she hadn't let herself think about anything beyond that. But now, staring into the warlord's burning gaze, the answer came to her. "I want freedom," she said. Vorkith chuckled. "Ah, a bold request." He tapped his claws against the table. "Very well. If you can create a dish unlike anything this galaxy has ever seen, one that even the Zyrax emperors would envy, I will grant you freedom." Myra's heart pounded. This was it. Her chance. She had to create something extraordinary. Something no ruler, no warlord, had ever tasted. And she had to do it fast, because she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If she failed, she would never leave this ship alive. Mira barely slept. The challenge Vorkith had given her was impossible. A dish unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. One that even the Syraxian emperors would envy. She spent every waking moment experimenting, drawing from every recipe she had ever learned. Human, Syraxian, and everything in between. She tested ingredients she hadn't dared touch before. Flesh moss from the deep core planets. Venom fruit that burned the tongue but left a lingering sweetness. Void marrow extracted from the bones of extinct creatures. And she failed, over and over again. The deadline loomed. Every second that passed was a countdown to her execution. Cordith was her only ally. He snuck in scraps of information, whispering to her through the slits in the ventilation system at night. "The warlord is restless," he said one evening. "His patience wears thin." Mira clenched her fists. She had to figure this out. She couldn't just make something new. She had to make something that would break the very foundation of Syraxian power. She stirred a pot of liquid starlight, watching its glow flicker under the dim kitchen lights. And then, she realized the answer had been in front of her the entire time. Food was strength to the Syraxians. It was the foundation of their status, the mark of their power. But what if she created something that defied that? Something that wasn't just flavor, but feeling? Something that didn't make the eater stronger, but weaker? She grinned. It was time to cook. The feast hall was packed. Vorkith sat at the head of the great obsidian table, surrounded by his officers, warlords, and high-ranking soldiers. A gathering of the strongest, most ruthless beings in the fleet. And in front of them, at the center of the table, a single dish. Mira stood beside it, hands steady. She had dressed in the fine silks the warlord had given her, an outfit meant to mock her status as a prized possession. But tonight, she wore it like armor. Vorkith leaned forward, examining the plate. "And this," he rumbled, "is the dish that will win your freedom?" Mira nodded. The warlord's burning orange eyes gleamed. "Then serve." She moved carefully, placing a portion in front of him first. Then, one by one, she served his highest officers. When every plate was full, she stepped back. Vorkith lifted his fork, piercing a morsel. The entire room held its breath. He brought it to his mouth and ate. For a single moment, nothing happened. Then, Vorkith stiffened. His claws tightened around his fork. His breath hitched. His pupils dilated. Myra's heart pounded. He was feeling it. The other officers took their first bites. A ripple of silence spread through the room. Some clenched their fists. Others gasped softly. One of the warlords set down his fork as if it had burned him. No one spoke. Mira had done it. The dish wasn't just food. It was memory. She had combined the starlight essence of a rare celestial fruit with a powerful neuroreactive spice, one that triggered deep-seated recollections. Every bite forced the eater to remember, not just anything, but their weakest moments, their fears, their regrets, the things they had buried so deep They no longer thought they could feel them. The Zyrax prided themselves on strength, on being unshakable. But Mira had stripped that away with a single dish. Vorkith's breath came in uneven. His hands trembled. His officers looked haunted. "You?" Vorkith growled, his voice strained. "What have you done?" Mira met his gaze. "I gave you something no emperor has ever tasted," she said softly. "Something you never knew you craved." Silence. Then, one of the warlords shoved his plate away, face twisted with rage. "This is sorcery." Another slammed his fist on the table. "Weakness." The room turned chaotic. Some of the officers were furious. Others looked lost. A few sat in stunned silence, still trapped in whatever memory the dish had dragged from their minds. Vorkith remained still. His fingers flexed, as if he was trying to ground himself. His breath was shallow. Mira didn't move. This was the moment, the tipping point. If she had miscalculated, if the warlord reacted with fury instead of fascination, she was dead. Vorkith slowly set down his fork. Then, to everyone's shock, he laughed. A low, rattling sound at first, then deeper, louder. The warlord threw his head back, roaring with laughter. "You clever little thing," he said, wiping a clawed hand over his mouth. His voice was filled with something Mira had never heard from him before, something close to delight. The officers fell silent. Vorkith leaned forward, fixing her with a look that sent chills through her spine. "You are no mere chef, human," he said. Mira braced herself. "You are a weapon." The word struck her like a lightning bolt. Vorkith stood, towering over her. "You have given me something no enemy ever has. Not pain, not fear, but understanding." Mira stared at him, heart pounding. He turned to his warlords. "What is strength without knowing weakness?" His gaze swept over them, lingering on those who had thrown their plates aside. "You call this dish sorcery? I call it power." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Vorkith grinned. "The human has passed her test. She has earned her freedom." Mira exhaled sharply. But the warlord wasn't finished. He stepped closer, his massive form looming over her. "Tell me, little chef," he said, voice dripping with amusement. "What would you do if I gave you more than just freedom?" Myra's pulse raced. "What do you mean?" Vorkith tilted his head. "You do not think I would let a mind like yours leave, do you?" He gestured at the officers. "You have changed something tonight. You have shown them what even the strongest fear. You have broken them without lifting a blade." Mira swallowed. Vorkith's grin widened. "I do not want you to be free, Mira," he said. "I want you to be mine." The words sent a chill through her. "Not as a slave," Vorkith continued. "Not as a cook." He stepped back, spreading his arms. "As my heir." Myra's breath caught. The officers gasped. Even Cordith, standing in the shadows, looked stunned. Vorkith's eyes gleamed. "With you by my side, we will reshape this galaxy. You will cook for emperors. You will bring rulers to their knees, not with war, but with a single bite." Myra's mind reeled. This was more than she had ever imagined, more than she had ever wanted. But deep down, she knew she had already won. Mira stared at Vorkith, her pulse hammering against her ribs. His heir? She had spent years clawing for freedom, surviving in the shadows of warlords who saw her as nothing more than an exotic pet. And now, in the span of one meal, she had risen higher than any human had ever stood in Syraxian history. The warlords murmured among themselves, some outraged, others wary. Cordith's expression was unreadable, though his stance remained rigid, tense. Myra's mind raced. She had been prepared to win her freedom. She had not been prepared for this. Vorkith chuckled, sensing her hesitation. He lifted his goblet, his deep voice reverberating through the hall. "Let be known," he declared, "this human is no longer a slave. She is my chosen successor." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The warlords exchanged uneasy glances. "This is madness," one of them muttered. "A human," another spat. Vorkith's burning gaze snapped toward them, his expression sharp. "Would any of you dare challenge her? After what she did tonight?" Silence. Mira exhaled. She wasn't naive. Vorkith's offer wasn't just about her talent. This was a game of power. By claiming her, He wasn't just elevating her. He was staking a claim on something new, something unpredictable. She met his gaze. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "what happens next?" Vorkith grinned. "Then you'll stand at my side. Learn the ways of the Empire. You will shape it, mold it, bring forth an era of dominance unlike any before." Mira swallowed. And if she refused, would he let her go? Or would she suddenly become too dangerous to be left alive? Her fingers curled into fists. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even about freedom. It was about power. Real power. She could take this empire and change it. Make it something new. Something better. Her heart pounded. She looked up at Vorkith, and for the first time in her life, she smiled. "I accept." The transition was not smooth. The Cyraxians were a warrior race, and they did not welcome change. Many saw her as a threat, a mockery of their traditions. Assassination attempts became a regular occurrence. Mira adapted quickly. She learned their language with ruthless efficiency. She studied their politics, their war tactics, their history. She played the game, and she played it well. Vorkith was no fool. He knew his warlords resented her, but he did not protect her outright. Instead, he let her prove herself. Every challenge thrown at her, every sabotage attempt, every political maneuver, she met with sharp wit and sharper instincts. She didn't just survive, she thrived. And through it all, Cordith remained at her side. "You're insane," he told her one evening, after she had outmaneuvered an attempted coup from one of the more radical warlords. Mira smirked. "That's why I'm still alive." He shook his head. "Do you even want this?" Mira hesitated. Then quietly she admitted, "I want to make sure no one else goes through what I did." Cordith studied her. Then he sighed. "Then I guess I'll stick around to make sure you don't get yourself killed." She grinned. "I'd appreciate that." Years passed. Mira became a legend. The human war lady. The empress of the Cyraxians. She revolutionized their empire. Not through war, but through something far more powerful. She weaponized food. Cyraxian officers soon realized that an empire built only on brutality could crumble under its own weight. But an empire built on influence, on understanding, that was unstoppable. Mira used her skills to infiltrate the courts of rival warlords, to sway planetary leaders, to break enemies without a single drop of blood spilled. A dish placed before a ruler could change the course of history. And it did. Vorkith watched with amusement as his empire transformed under her touch. "You have done what no conqueror ever could," he admitted one night, as they stood overlooking a conquered world. "You have made our enemies crave what we offer." Mira smirked. "A blade can make a man kneel." She lifted a goblet of rare wine. "But a meal can make him follow." Vorkith laughed, shaking his head. "You are more dangerous than any warlord I have ever known." Mira sipped her wine, gazed distant. "And yet," she murmured, "there is still so much more to do." The day finally came when Vorkith fell. A brutal war. A betrayal from within. Mira stood over his broken body, his blood staining the steel floor of the warship's throne room. The old warlord looked up at her, grinning despite his wounds. "You were always meant to take my place," he rasped. Mira knelt beside him, taking his hand. "I'll make sure your legacy doesn't die," she said softly. Vorkith exhaled one last breath, and Mira stood. The warlords who had gathered around them fell silent, waiting. She turned to them, shoulders squared. "Vorkith is dead," she declared. "And now, the empire is mine." Some kneeled immediately. Others hesitated. One warlord, older and hardened by years of battle, stepped forward. "You are not Cyraxian," he said coldly. Mira met his gaze. "No," she agreed. "I am human." She turned to the rest of them. "And that is why you will follow me." The silence stretched. Then, slowly, the warlords knelt. One by one, Mira exhaled. She had done it. She was no longer a slave, no longer a cook, no longer just a survivor. She was the empress of the Galactic Dominion, and she had only just begun. The galaxy had changed. Under Empress Myra's rule, the Cyraxian Empire was no longer a brute force war machine. It became something greater, an empire of influence, of strategy, of power wielded not only through weapons, but through culture, diplomacy, and the one thing no species had ever weaponized before: food. With each conquered world, Mira didn't just take territory. She transformed it. Alien courts that once resisted the Empire found themselves craving its spices, its wines, its carefully crafted delicacies. The galaxy had never known a conqueror like her. And with each dish, each carefully planned banquet, the legend of the human empress spread. Some feared her. Some worshipped her. All remembered her. A century later, the small child pressed his face to the glass, staring in awe at the holographic monument before him. The towering figure of Mira loomed over the plaza, her regal robes flowing as if caught in an unseen wind, her piercing gaze watching over the city. At her feet, an inscription glowed in golden letters, written in a dozen languages. Power is not taken by force alone. It is taken by knowing what your enemy craves and giving it to them before they know they need it. The boy turned to his father. Did she really come from a slave kitchen? He asked, eyes wide. His father smiled. She did, and she changed everything. The boy frowned. But she was human, right? Just one human. His father chuckled. One human was enough. In the far reaches of space, not all remembered Mira with admiration. On the cold edges of the galaxy, in the ruins of an empire long since swallowed by hers, voices whispered in darkened halls. "We were mighty once," a hooded figure murmured. "Before she came. We must take back what was ours," another agreed. They gathered around an ancient war table, activating a flickering star chart. "But how?" someone muttered. "The human empress is long dead. Her empire stands stronger than ever." The leader raised a single clawed hand, activating a final recording, a grainy, distorted message, old beyond reckoning. A human voice. Myra's voice. "A blade can make a man kneel, but a meal can make him follow." Silence filled the room. Then the leader leaned forward, voice cold as the void. "Then we will find the humans she left behind, and we will erase them. A distant planet, unknown to the galaxy." The fire crackled in the quiet night. A group of travelers sat around it, sharing stories over steaming bowls of stew. A young woman, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, stirred her spoon absently. "I heard the Empress once tamed an entire species just by feeding them the right meal," she mused. An older man across from her smirked. "I heard she convinced warlords to kneel without ever drawing a blade." A child beside them grinned. "I heard she never stopped fighting, even after she died." The young woman chuckled. "Maybe she's still out there." The fire crackled. Somewhere above them, the stars burned bright. The final whisper. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. The name Mira drifted into legend. Some believed she had been a goddess. Others believed she had never existed at all. But among the oldest races, in the deepest archives of the galaxy, one phrase endured. Words spoken in defiance, in hope, in unbreakable will. "Human, don't stop.